You've felt it before. That quiet ache when you're alone at night, staring at the ceiling, knowing deep down that you are not living the life you were meant to live. That gnawing feeling that there's something inside you, hidden, unspoken, untamed, that you've been running from for years. Carl Jung had a name for this. He called it the shadow. And in his words, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think about that. Every time you've sabotaged yourself, every time you've chosen comfort over courage, every time you've stayed silent when you should have spoken up, it wasn't really a choice. It was the silent hand of your unconscious, shaping your life while you told yourself the lie. This is just how I am. But what if I told you Jung had one rule, a single principle, that could tear away this invisible leash and give you back control over your life? Not a motivational quote, not a 5-step hack, a brutal, uncompromising truth that will demand everything from you. And in return, give you everything. And here's the thing, most people don't want to hear it, because to follow this rule is to go to war, not with the world, but with yourself, and the war will not be easy. History is filled with the ghosts of those who refused to face their shadow. The father who lived in quiet resentment until his children grew up fearing his silence. The woman who spent her life pleasing everyone else, only to look in the mirror at 60 and realize she never once lived for herself. The millions who die each year, not from disease of the body, but from disease of the soul, a slow death of self-betrayal. Jung saw it all, and he gave us the map out, but most people throw it away the moment they see where it leads. In this video, we're not going to talk about Jung like a university lecture. We're going to walk into the fire with him. We're going to see why this rule matters, what it will cost you, and why ignoring it might be the greatest tragedy of your life. And when you reach the end, you will have a choice: go back to sleep, or pick up the weapon Jung left for you and step into the life you were meant to live. Asterisk, some lives are not destroyed by fire, but by slow erosion. Not in one dramatic moment, but through 1,000 small surrenders. The mother who silences her dreams for years until she forgets what they were. The man who wakes up each day already exhausted, not from work, but from carrying a self he does not believe in. People pass them in the street and never see the quiet collapse taking place. Behind their eyes, Carl Jung understood this hidden decay. He saw that much of our suffering is not accidental, it's self-inflicted, though we rarely know it. In his words, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. That sentence is not poetry. It's an autopsy. Report for the human spirit. Look around. Why do people cling to jobs that strip them of dignity? Why do lovers stay in relationships where the air is thick with unspoken resentment? Why do we choose numbness over transformation? Jung's answer was brutal, because we fear the confrontation with our own shadow more than we fear misery itself. And here lies the one rule, his most dangerous gift. That could change everything, that this is not the kind of rule you write on a vision board. It is the kind that pulls you apart and forces you to meet the person you have been avoiding for decades. The cost is high. You will lose your illusions, your comfortable lies, your false identity. But the reward is that you will finally stop living someone else's life. This is what we're about to unfold, not as theory, not as philosophy on a dusty page, but as a mirror that refuses to look away. Because if you hear this truth and turn from it, your life will go on, but it will not be yours. Asterisk, the prison you can't see. Some prisons have walls, others have routines. The most dangerous kind has neither. You wake up, brush your teeth, go to work, come home, scroll through a glowing screen until your eyelids grow heavy. Repeat. The cage is not around you, it's inside you. Carl Jung believed that most people are not free, even in so-called free societies, because they are possessed by the unconscious. He wasn't speaking in a mystical sense. He meant something far more unsettling, that we are ruled by impulses, fears, and wounds we refuse to confront. We call these choices, but Jung would call them compulsions in disguise. Think about the friend who always ends up dating the same kind of person, even though it always ends the same way. Think about the man who works himself into the ground, not for ambition, but to silence the shame his father left in him. Think about the child who grew into an adult terrified of speaking up, because somewhere in the past, being silent was safer. These are not random patterns. They are psychological fingerprints. Evidence of the inner jailer running the show. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But here's the thing, most people will defend their prison. They will tell you their suffering is inevitable. Their habits are just who they are. Their failures are bad luck. Because to admit otherwise would mean tearing away the story that's kept them safe but unfulfilled. The tragedy is that the walls of this prison are often made of love and loyalty. The woman who refuses to outgrow her parents' expectations because she owes them everything. The man who won't leave the family business even though it's killing him because this is the way it's always been. These walls don't feel like chains, they feel like duty. Jung's one rule, when we get to it, will demand you break those walls, and you will hate him for it before you thank him. Because the first step to freedom is realizing that your life, as it stands right now, is a compromise between who you truly are and who the world taught you to be. The question is, which side is winning? Why we protect the prison. Some wounds don't bleed. They bury themselves in the architecture of the soul and build a home there. They become the way we speak, the way we choose, the way we avoid. Carl Jung observed that people will guard these wounds with a kind of fierce tenderness because they have mistaken them for identity. A man betrayed in love learns distrust, and decades later, he calls it wisdom. A child humiliated in front of a classroom grows into an adult who avoids risk, and he calls it realism. We give noble names to our fears so that no one, not even ourselves, will try to take them away. Jung wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents." It's not just about parents, it's about inheritance. Of the unfulfilled, we carry unlived dreams, unspoken griefs, and unresolved guilt as though they were family heirlooms. And because they came to us early, we mistake them for truth. This is why the prison feels so familiar. It was built in childhood. When you were small, survival meant adaptation, learning what earned approval and what provoked rejection. You learned to suppress what made others uncomfortable, even if it was your deepest truth. Those adaptations became habits. Those habits became personality. And now, as an adult, you can't tell the difference between protection and imprisonment. Jung's shadow is not simply the darkness you hide. It's the light you've been taught to dim. That rebellious streak you buried because it scared your parents. That creative impulse you mocked in yourself because the world laughed first. That hunger for meaning you've drowned under routine because it made others uneasy. The irony is cruel. The very parts of you that could set you free are the ones you've been most afraid to touch. And here's the philosophical blade Jung turns on us. Freedom is not achieved by adding more to ourselves, but by reclaiming what we abandoned. The shadow, he said, is 90% pure gold, but you will never find that gold while pretending the shadow isn't there. This is why most people never change. They don't fear the work. It's not about discipline or motivation. They fear what the work will reveal, because to open that door is to confront the truth that their entire life so far has been, at least in part, a performance. The next chapter will take us to that door, not as an abstract idea, but as a real confrontation. The moment you meet the part of yourself you've been taught to exile. Meeting the exiled self. There comes a point when you can no longer explain away the unease. You've tried distraction. You've tried achievement. You've tried burying yourself in the noise of other people's lives. But the moment comes, sometimes in silence, sometimes in crisis, when the mask slips, and you see a stranger in the mirror. Carl Jung warned that the shadow is not a distant enemy, it lives under your own skin. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the confrontation most people spend their lives avoiding. Because the shadow is not only your cruelty, your fear, your envy, It is also your unlived courage, your unspoken love, your abandoned creativity. It is everything you decided was too much for the world to accept. Meeting it feels like betrayal. Betrayal of the version of you your parents praised. Betrayal of the role your friends know. Betrayal of the image you've so carefully built. But this betrayal is the first honest act you will perform in years. Consider the artist who became an accountant because art wasn't practical, only to spend decades living in quiet starvation of the soul. Consider the woman who grew up being the responsible one, so she never let herself be vulnerable, never let herself need anyone, and now cannot understand why love feels like a foreign language.